Island, Chapter 17. Narrative continued by the Doctor, the Jolly Boat's last trip. This fifth trip was quite different from any of the others. In the first place, the little gallipot of a boat that we were in was gravely overloaded. 5 grown men, and 3 of them, Trelawney, Redruth, and the captain, over 6 feet high, was already more than she was meant to carry. Add to that the powder, pork, and bread bags. The gunwale was slipping astern. Several times we shipped a little water, and my breeches and the tails of my coat were all soaking wet before we had gone 100 yards. The captain made us trim the boat. We got her to lie a little more evenly. All the same, we were afraid to breathe. In the second place, the ebb was now making a strong rippling current running westward through the basin, and then southward and seaward down the straits by which we had entered this morning. Even the ripples were a danger to our overloaded craft. But the worst of it was that we were swept off of our true course and away from our proper landing place beyond the point. If we let the current have its way, we should have come ashore beside the gigs, where the pirates might appear at any moment. "I cannot keep her head for the stockade, sir," I said to the captain as I was steering, while he and Redruth, 2 fresh men, were at the oars. "The tide keeps washing her down. Could you pull a little stronger?" "Not without swamping the boat," says he. "You must bear up, sir, if you please. Bear up until you can see you're gaining." I tried and found by experiment that the tide kept sweeping us westward until I laid her head due east, or just about at right angles to the way we ought to go. "We'll never get ashore at this rate," I said. "If it's the only course that we can lie, sir, we must even lie it," returned the captain. "We must keep up stream. You see, sir," he went on, "if at once we drop to the leeward of the landing place, it's hard to say where we should get ashore, beside the chance of being boarded by the gigs, whereas the way we go the current must slacken, and then we can dodge back along the shore." "The current's less already, sir," said the man Gray, who was stirring aforesheets. "You can ease off a bit." "Thank you, my man," said I, quite as if nothing had happened, for we had all quietly made up our minds to treat him like one of ourselves. Suddenly the captain spoke up again, and I thought his voice was a little changed. "The guns," said he. "I've thought of that," said I, for I made sure that I was thinking of a bombardment of the fort. They could never get the gun ashore, and if they did, they could never haul it through the woods. "Look astern, Doctor," replied the captain. We had entirely forgotten the long 9, and there, to our horror, were the 5 rogues busy about her, getting off her jacket, as they called the stout tarpaulin cover under which she sailed. Not only that, but it flashed into my mind at the same moment that the round shot and the powder for the gun had been left behind, and a stroke with an axe would put it all into the possession of the evil ones aboard. "Israel was Flint's gunner," said Gray hoarsely. "At any risk, we'll put the boat head direct for the landing place." By this time we had got so far out of the run of the current that we kept steerage way, even our necessary gentle rate of rowing, and I could keep her steady for the goal. But the worst of it was that with the course I now held, we turned our broadside instead of our stern to the Hispaniola, and offered a target like a barn door. I could hear as well as see the brandy-faced rascal Israel Hands pumping down a round shot on the deck. "Who's the best shot?" asked the captain. "Mr. Trelawney, out and away," said I. "Mr. Trelawney, will you pick me off one of these men, sir? Hands, if possible," said the captain. Trelawney was as cool as steel. He looked to the priming of his gun. "Now," cried the captain, "easy with that gun, sir, or you'll swamp the boat. All hands stand by to trim her when he aims." The squire raised his gun, the rowing ceased, and we leaned over to the other side to keep balance, and all was so nicely contrived that we did not ship a drop. They had a gun by this time slewed round and upon the swivel, and Hands, who was at the muzzle with the rammer, was in consequence the most exposed. However, we had no luck, for just as Trelawney fired, he stooped, and the ball whistled over him, and it was one of the other 4 who fell. The cry he gave was echoed not only by his companions on board, but by a great number of voices from the shore, and looking in the direction I saw the other pirates trooping out from among the trees and tumbling into their places in the boats. "Here comes the gigs, sir," said I. "Give way, then," cried the captain. "We mustn't mind if we swamp her now. If we can't get ashore, all's up." "Only one of the gigs is being manned, sir," I added, "the crew of the other most likely going roundabout by shore to cut us off." "They'll have a hot run, sir," returned the captain. "Jack ashore, you know. It's not them that I mind, it's the round shot. Carpet bowls, my lady's maid couldn't miss. Tell us, squire, when you see the match, and we'll hold water. In the meanwhile, we had been making headway a good pace for a boat so overloaded. We had shipped a little water in the process, for we were now close in, 30 or 40 strokes, and we should beach her, for the ebb had already disclosed a narrow belt of sand below the clustering trees. The gig was no longer to be feared. The little point had already concealed it from our eyes. The ebb tide, which had so cruelly delayed us, was now making reparation and delaying our assailants. The one source of danger was the gun. If I durst, said the captain, I'd stop and pick off another man, but it was plain that they meant nothing should delay their shot, for they never so much looked at their fallen comrade, though he was not dead, and I could see him trying to crawl away. Ready, cried the squire. Hold, cried the captain, quick as an echo, and he and Redruth backed with a great heave that sent her stern bodily under water. The report fell at the same instant of time. This was the first that Jim heard, the sound of the squire's shot not having reached him. Where the ball passed, not one of us precisely know, but I fancy it must have been over our heads, and that the wind of it may have contributed to our disaster. At any rate, our boat sank by the stern quite gently, and in 3 feet of water, leaving the captain and myself facing each other on our feet. The other 3 took complete headers and came up again drenched and bubbling. So far there was no great harm, no lives were lost, and we could wade ashore in safety. But there were all of our stores at the bottom. To make things worse, only 2 guns out of the 5 remained in a state of service. Mine I had snatched from my knees and held over my head by a sort of instinct. As for the captain, he carried his over his shoulder by a bandolier like a wise man, lock uppermost. The other 3 had gone down with the boat. To add to our concern, we heard voices already drawing near us in the woods along the shore. We had not only the danger of being cut off from the stockade in our half-crippled state, but the fear of us before whether, if Hunter and Joyce were attacked by a half a dozen, whether they would have the sense and conduct to stand firm. Hunter was steady, that we knew. Joyce was a doubtful case, a pleasant, polite man for a valet, and to brush one's clothes, but not entirely fitted for a man of war. With all this in our minds, we waded ashore as fast as we could, leaving behind us the poor jolly boat, and good half of all our powder and provisions. This is the end of chapter 17. So, you have the guns underwater, and salt water just corrodes things miserably. Plus, when they get wet, the powder gets wet, and wet powder won't ignite, especially not powder wet with salt water. They dumped a whole bunch of other guns overboard back on the ship in the last chapter. And one of the things I wanted to tell you about that was they were in 2 fathoms of water. Now, there are different measurements for distance and things that seamen use because they're more convenient. A fathom is 6 feet, so 2 fathoms is 12 feet. I can swim down 12 feet from the surface. It's hard. It's difficult to do, but I can do it. Your dad can probably do it. It takes a lot of work. And then bringing up a heavy piece of metal might be doable. I'm not sure I would be sure of myself going down and retrieving a rifle from the bottom of the water, but I might be able to manage it. If you held a gun to my head, I would certainly give it a shot. Puns intended there. But so the pirates don't have the rifles. They have the cannon, but they can't get the cannon off the boat. It looks like the pirates are down 1 person, with none of the heroes being injured so far, so that's kind of a win. They left a bunch of supplies, that powder sealed in casks. If the casks are sealed tightly and the powder stays dry, then it works. If the gunpowder gets wet, then there's a whole bunch of chemical reactions that can happen, and the gunpowder will stop working. Gunpowder, I can tell you how to make it, is a mix of charcoal, sulfur, and potassium nitrate. Now, getting potassium nitrate's a little bit difficult. Getting charcoal's easy to make. Sulfur is easy to buy. two of the three of these things you can get from a garden supply shop. You can get charcoal and you can get sulfur. And you can grind them up and mix them together and have something that smells absolutely horrible when it burns. But the potassium nitrate's the real trick here. To make it explosive, you need a fuel and an oxidizer. Now, gunpowder isn't a explosive normally. It sort of explodes. It doesn't really explode. It just burns really, really fast. And because it burns really, really fast, it creates a lot of gas, and the gas expands, and the expanding gas pushes the bullet down the barrel of the gun. An explosion, there's actually a shock wave that moves through and causes the chemical reaction to proceed faster than it normally would. So what you have is you have something that the explosion travels by the shock wave. So the shock wave actually causes the explosion to propagate. But gunpowder, as I said, just burns really, really fast. And it has the fuel, the charcoal, and it has the oxidizer, the potassium nitrate. Potassium nitrate KNO3. So 1 potassium, 1 nitrogen, 3 oxygens. So when that breaks down, it releases the potassium, which is a metal, which kind of gunks things up a little bit, but there's only a little bit of it and it's widely dispersed. A nitrogen, which recombines with itself. So you have 1 nitrogen for 1 potassium nitrate joining up with a nitrogen from another potassium nitrate. And those merge and form nitrogen. And then the oxygen combines with the carbon, makes carbon dioxide. So you have this whole bunch of gas and a whole bunch of heat pushing the bullet out of the rifle.